welcome back to the show. You know who it is. It's your boy Jay Hanahan, and I'm back with another episode of How to Kill a Sacred Cow. Tonight on the podcast, we have Tony Arterburn. He is the host of the Arterburn Radio Transmission, as well as a veteran of 3 foreign wars. So I thought him uniquely positioned to talk about the crisis that's going on in Ukraine. I wanted to bring him on the show to talk about some of the background, macro, historical stuff, as well as some of the on-the-ground stuff, and a lot of the general fuckery that's been going on in the mainstream media with regards to fake photos, fake pictures, fake narratives, the whole shebang. And I thought we did a really good job about putting this crisis in its historical perspective. He has an incredible Rockfin channel that I want everybody to go check out. You can definitely go check out his podcast feed. All relevant links will be in the show notes. And I'm also going to do a follow-up episode to this that is going to be exclusive on my Rockfin channel. That's right, I got it up. I've been putting episodes up, and I'm going to put a good chunk of the last 10, 15 episodes up, as well as start rolling forward. Everything from here on out will be on Rockfin, and there will be premium content for subscribers only. If anybody would like to check that out, you can go to the website. There will be a link at the bottom of the homepage. That will be a nice little button just for the Rockfin. And of course, it'll be on the link tree, of which you can find on my Instagram page. And if anybody wants to help out the show, you can go to howtokillasacredcow.com. You'll find at the bottom of the page the PayPal button, as well as the donate cryptocurrency button. Or you can subscribe to Amazon. That banner is right above those two buttons. Or you can go to the library page, and you can buy any one of the suggested books, or you can buy any one of the books from any guest I've had on the show. All of them are there, and I'm very happy with the way the show's turning out. I've already got a ton of followers on Rockfin. I don't even know how that happened. I had a bunch of followers before I had even released anything, but I'm happy to have you there. So go meet me over at Rockfin. And this episode will be over there, but I will also have a follow-up episode up, hopefully tonight, if not by tomorrow. I've got a ton of episodes to release on the podcast feed, and I'm a little backed up. I don't have enough time to edit it all, but I'm very happy with the way everything's going. And like I said, go check out the Arterburn Radio Transmission. And if you've never heard of him before, or if this is your first time hearing about him, then you have over 300 episodes to go check out on his feed. Now, without any further ado, Mr. Tony Arterburn. All right, I want everybody to welcome Tony Arterburn to the show. Tony, how you doing tonight, man?
I'm doing fantastic. Thanks for having me.
Dude, I am so happy to have you on. Like we were saying off air, when I actually dug in and got to listen to the first couple episodes of yours that I had listened to, I realized that I was listening to a very like mind, especially in terms of your background on history. Your understanding of history is deep and it's wide, which is refreshing, because a lot of times, not necessarily in this community, but with radio show hosts, people that are on some of the more popular platforms, they tend to keep everything very much at a surface level. Yeah. So when I was very pleased when I opened up your most recent episode, at least the most recent one I listened to, and I heard you just reading from War is a Racket, I was like, this is my dude. I got to get him on the show. Let's do this. So I wanted to get you on the show to talk about Ukraine for a couple of reasons. First off, you're a veteran, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
All right.
The 3 foreign wars. I was a U.S. Army paratrooper and a military policeman from 1999 to 2004.
Okay, so were you? Is that Kosovo, Iraq?
Kosovo, Afghanistan, Iraq. Yeah.
Kosovo. Oh man, that's a heavy 10 years, man.
It did 5, and it was back to back to back, and we were the first Army company on the ground in Kandahar, Afghanistan. So after we actually landed within, I think it was like New Year's Eve 2001, I got on the tarmac in Kandahar. So I'm real proud of that service. But I would say, the genre and the business that we're in, we know the research and how fake all of that actually was, and we were being played. And I didn't know that. Even a great part of the intelligence communities didn't seem to know that, and how compartmentalized this inside job was, known as 9/11. I've talked about it many times, but I kind of separate myself from, being jaded by that and saying I'm proud to, serve with the warrior class. There's people that love liberty and love the country, and they want to serve. You just have, psychopath lizard people controlling the foreign policy of the United States. So it's kind of hard to, I mean, you can go full spectrum, like kind of just the whole thing's bad, but I love the military, love the veterans. And I think a lot of them have come over to my way of thinking, even people that I serve with, because I'm like, hey, I don't present my information and I know more than you kind of way. It's just, did you know, by the way, these aren't what you perceive as reality isn't true. And, Henry Ford said that history is bunk. And I think that's what we as broadcasters try to do, is just, get to the heart of the matter. What is true?
It's a tough thing to grapple with, especially when you spend time there on the ground. I've worked for a VA for 15 years. I'm coming up on 15 years. I started working there. So my story was that I was in the ROTC in high school. And they certainly aren't aggressive in pushing you towards the service, but it's always on there on the table. They're like, you need any references, any path to get into the service, we got you. And that was the same time that they were ramping up to go to war in Iraq. And that was even as a kid, it just didn't sit right with me. So I chose not to go that route. Ended up going and working for a VA. It's just it's in my family, all that type of stuff. So it's definitely been very eye-opening to hear all the stories over the years. The good and the bad, the ugly, and especially these days, a lot of the veterans that I speak with, if they don't know something's going on, some don't smell right, and So what I really do want to get in with you today is maybe we can have some sort of a discussion on some of the background history of Ukraine and some of the just straight up fuckery that's been going on. Because I mean, we could sit here and this could be just a show on just fake pictures. And we could spend an hour talking about that. But what's your feeling on what's going on right now? And you can start the story anywhere you'd like, starting from the post Cold War Ukraine or whatever. Where do you think the story starts, really?
Well, I think in this particular incident, the story starts at the fall of the Soviet Union and the promises that were made to Gorbachev by Secretary of State James Baker. And I've known this for many years. It's not like, hey, I'm researching what happened in Ukraine. Like, I've been reading about foreign policy, since my early 20s. I studied some of the works of Pat Buchanan. He wrote a book, a great book on foreign policy called A Republic, Not an Empire. And that's where I learned about Russia, about, the nation state of Russia after the fall of the Soviet Union. And you learn about that history where we gave a verbal promise. We told Gorbachev, hey, look, you've got some internal unrest. It looks like it's coming apart. So here's what we'll do. You pull back into the borders of Russia with the Soviet army. You bring the Red Army back into Russia's borders, and we will not expand NATO. Because, NATO, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, that was started in 1950s. That was built to push back, be a wall against Soviet expansion. And of course, they had the Warsaw Pact, and the Cold War lasted until 1991 with the fall of the Soviet Union. So if you go to that point, we gave a verbal promise. Nothing was in writing. And that's always the argument from the neocons and the war hawks. They're like, well, it wasn't in writing. Like, it's okay to just, use the honor, that's whatever's left of the honor of the United States of America, and just throw it in the garbage can because you want war, because you want to be the hegemonic dominant power in the world. And so we lied. And you look at the timeline by the 90s, Yeltsin was in power, but Gorbachev was talking about this. The Russian people know that we were breaking our promise by expanding NATO, by intervening all throughout Eastern Europe in the late 90s. And so that just kind of grew and grew. And then, you look at 2004, we have the color revolution going on. I believe that's 2004, where the CIA, I think it was the Orange Revolution there in Ukraine. You go to 2014, and we had literally a coup. I mean, a CIA-backed coup, and the Democratic leader. We talk about democracy. We're going to save democracy, and I'm like, well, you overthrew the democratically elected leader of Ukraine's, so-called, and that guy went to Russia. So, I'm just a guy I'm a paratrooper that likes books, and I happen to understand that history. So, when you're parking biological weapons labs on the border of Russia with Western powers, and you're talking about expanding NATO and putting Ukraine in the EU and Ukraine into NATO. John McCain very much wanted Ukraine in NATO. I just ask people to ask themselves, what would we do if China and Mexico signed a trade and defense pact, and they said, look, if Mexico said, we're having so much problems with the Americans, we'll just side with China, with the they've got the control of the Panama Canal now. Might as well have control of the U.S. southern border, and they started parking weapons and supplies and bio labs, and we're going to put missiles there. I mean, ICBMs or short range nuclear missiles. We would go to war, and we look at the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962. Kennedy, 90 miles off the coast of Florida, these weapons in Cuba were offensive. They were meant to do a first strike capability offensive war. And look, I mean, thank God we had. By the way, I'm wearing my Kennedy shirt today. It's kind of faded, but I'm wearing a JFK on the t-shirt. And he traded some missiles in Turkey. They were the Jupiter class, nuclear missiles. And anyway, that was a move to peace, because we both, Khrushchev in the United States and Kennedy, realized that putting a gun to someone's head is not real. That's not how peace is made or diplomacy is made. It's how war is made. And that we just had we traded off, the Jupiter missiles for the missiles in Cuba, and that seemed to work. But that was a tense moment. It almost it almost started World War III. And now it seems like our leaders are like, yeah, we don't even know about that. Like what I just said, I don't think that top level people even know the history. And I'm not saying that to be arrogant. This is why I call this woke war one. Like, I don't think this is World War III. I think World War III is like the governments of the world against the people, which is what they've been doing with COVID 1984. But I just think this is woke war one, where you've got this flailing American empire that's bloated. You spend like on the F-35. I don't know how much. I think they spend like $1 trillion. They still can't make the thing work. I mean, we're just flailing around looking for an enemy. We don't even know the history. We don't know how things got there. We're always trying to hire the first person, like of some category, like fill in the blank, but not the best. I think that's really showing now. So I mean, they're risking everything for. You have people saying we got to do a no-fly zone. I don't think people realize how serious that is. The powers that be want you to think, well, we did that to Gaddafi. We can do it to Vladimir Putin. No, you cannot. And, you shoot down a Russian aircraft, and I think you've pretty much gotten into the realm of the end of days. Because it's not going to go, they're not going to back down. They're not going to allow you just to bully them and do what we did to Saddam Hussein. It's funny growing up in the 90s, you hear about Saddam Hussein. And when I got to Iraq, I go, wow, this is really broken. Like it was just worn out. I remember, in going in through Kuwait to hit the Iraqi border. And I mean, they had like Burger King and like, it was just like normal. I mean, it's 180 degrees outside, but there was normal things like what you would see stateside. And when you cross that hardball into Iraq, it was just like you went back 40 years and actually you went to another dimension. And I just remember thinking, this guy's the new Hitler. We can't even shoot down an aircraft. What are you talking about, new Hitler? And it's always a new Hitler. It's always 1938 to these idiots. And there's always appeasement and we can't do this or that. But, you're not going to get that same response. And I think Americans they're used to just waging war, and that makes it easy because they're not really directly involved. We have a volunteer military, and that has gotten us into a lot of trouble. I mean, in retrospect, people, when their family members are involved and they don't want to fight in a war, then politically it becomes very unpopular. But we kind of keep that class of people, military, hidden away. And you can see, like, we've ground our military down over the last 20 plus. I mean, it is a crime what we've done, rotating them into oblivion. And that's why I say they're going to get a rude awakening if they press this issue. And I'm not taking Vladimir Putin's side. I'm just telling you why they invaded Ukraine. I think it was coming to the head of it's national survival, because it seemed like any day they were going to announce that Ukraine was part of NATO. I think that was the plan. And I think that's why but obviously they wanted this to happen. That's my opinion. I mean, they were loving it. I mean, Joe Biden can go, it's not my gas prices, it's Vladimir Putin, and people go, yeah, it is. It's Vladimir Putin. If only he had invaded Ukraine. So it's very convenient to have that, what H.L. Mencken called an endless series of hobgoblins. They always come up with a new hobgoblin. So I don't know. I'm for peace. I think war is organized murder. I think war should only be used for defensive purposes, like defending your home or defending your country against attack. And I think we've, as a culture, have become very comfortable with our military constantly involved in a war, and that may be coming to an end, because we may have just, eventually you just you get to the wrong door. It's not good on the other side. And we've fought some really terrible battles. Iraq had it not been for modern medical technology and modern body armor and up armored Humvees, it'd have been just as bad as Vietnam, maybe worse, as far as casualties are concerned. But we didn't seem to learn anything from Iraq, and certainly didn't learn anything from Afghanistan. So I don't want us to learn anything in Europe either, because I don't understand what the goal would be.
Yeah, and you're dealing with a totally different type of beast. That's a first world army you're talking about. That's Russia. And just like you had mentioned, H.L. Mencken's, another one of his famous quotes is, "Believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see." And that has been no more true than in these past couple of years, brother. And so it's been crazy. I'm telling you that this COVID-19 stuff, it dovetailed so nicely into this new war out of nowhere with Russia that has been in motion since 2014, since they overthrew the democratically elected government of the Ukraine and installed some neo-Nazis, which is always a recipe for success. And if for anybody that's been watching this for a long time, because I had a podcast back from 2012 to 2015, and we had our eyes on Ukraine that entire period, especially because of what the State Department was doing over there with, these weird villains just keep popping out like it's Marvel or it's DC or something like that. Victoria Nuland just pops out of nowhere, of course it would be Russia 100%. That would be doing a false flag with with fucking bio weapons out of the labs that we've had there, since 2014. And, Marco Rubio just standing on, sitting on his pulpit up there. Do you believe 100%? It's just the craziest drama I've ever seen play itself out. And this whole cast of characters, like Biden, they raise him from the dead. Victoria Nuland's come out of I'm just waiting for Hillary Clinton to just take control of the State Department again. But actually, you've got this clown, Ned Price, over there. I don't know if you saw anything that he was saying today, but I was trying to dovetail into believe, half of what you see, because so much of what has come out, out of every major narrative that they've tried to put forth about this Ukraine war, has been entirely false, like down to like showing clips of video games and saying it's real life. And the maternity ward, of which Russia had said weeks ago, they said, yeah, by the way, this is now a military installation, and what are you guys trying to do? Like, what the hell is going on here? And I've seen videos of citizens from Ukraine saying that that the Ukrainian tanks are shelling their homes and their villages, and just all kinds of crazy stuff. What do you make of all this? And let's start with the biolabs. What do you know about the biolabs and this whole narrative that Russia is going to false flag attack Ukraine and say it's America?
First of all, for the White House press briefing to include in their talking points, did we mention false flag? I mean, insinuating not only they're first of all, they're admitting that actually exists, which I found to be fascinating. Like, that's never happened before. That's what started getting me worried about this. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Well, first I was worried before, but that was next level. Like, they're signaling something has changed, that they're willing just to throw these terms out, like, false flag. And it's going to be the Russians that create the false flag that makes themselves look like the victims to create the pretext for invasion. And I'm like, okay, well, just about that same time, you hear the information on the biolabs come out, which I would suspect that we already had that working. I mean, we like to go into these countries where there's not a lot of oversight. We like to I think flex a bit, and then like, hey, look what we're doing right on because the KGB and the Russian intelligence is going to know that what we're doing. This is a signal. Everything is language, is very complicated language, but I don't know the extent. I mean, it's interesting. Chernobyl's the first place they really locked down. Like, the Russians held. They're holding Chernobyl, which you're like, well, why? Well, it's because is it radiation? Is it the ability to they could create something there and then blame it on the Russia. I don't know. It's this thing is ridden with propaganda and hearsay. I mean, all we can really do is kind of understand the pretext for, at this point, why Russia would invade. And we never, like, I looked at Facebook earlier and it just shows these Ukrainian kids walking, and then there's like shells coming down and it says like support Ukraine. And I'm like, we did that in Iraq. And I don't agree with either one of those things, but let's be fair and let's examine ourselves. If we want to have a better future, perhaps we should watch our own behavior. But then again, that's neither here nor there. But you're looking at like next level propaganda. Here's an example. You go to the Drudge Report about a week ago, and they were counting like losses of Russian troops. And it was showing like thousands lost. And one of them said like, counting was 1,000 Russian troops lost I don't know if it was like a week or whatever it was. And then I started doing the math and I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Let's go over here and look at the antiwar.com. Let's look at the UN. The UN was saying that they were estimating about 300 to 400 Ukrainian civilians have been killed at that time. And I said, now, wait a minute. How can you have 1,000 Russian troops lost and only, 300 or 400 civilians lost? That doesn't make any sense, because if you look at our ratio, like in invading Iraq, 2, 3, 4 years in, we lost about 2,500 people that were killed, but UN was estimating tens of hundreds of thousands. Nobody really knew the number, but it was nowhere near our casualty rate. So that in alone, just knowing war and the cost of war, that doesn't make any sense. And so this is very. It's like that we're, instead of them upplaying Russia like it's a nasty villain and that they're so capable, we're saying, hey, look at all these troops they're losing, and Zelensky's a new Churchill, and they're getting eaten up by this Ukrainian meat grinder. And I'm like, I don't know where the truth begins here or the lie ends. I don't know. It's not our fight. You can put it that way, but we certainly have some responsibility here, because we goaded this into happening, in my opinion. We bear that responsibility. And I think you probably know this history too. Ukraine would do well to know what happened to Poland, and what happened to Poland after World War I, when they made Big Poland, and leading up to World War II, the British gave all the war guarantees to Poland, and they weren't negotiating. The Third Reich and the Nazis, for good or ill, they wanted German-speaking territory back that was lost at the Treaty of Versailles. in World War I. And once Poland got that war guarantee, all the negotiations stopped. And that's what, was a pretext for invasion. But hey, at the end of the war, 50 million dead, the world turned upside down, Europe in ashes, all the things. We went to war over Poland. This is what the pretext, 1939, September 1st. We gave Poland to Stalin at the end of the war. So what was all that for? And people call World War II the good war, but it's 50 million dead, everything's in ashes, Japan's in ashes. And then we give Poland to Stalin, who's a even, greater butcher. So what do the Ukrainians learn from that is that to go their own way, and to play the politics smart in their region. I mean, nobody like Russia, and neither should Ukraine, should not want foreign influence, guiding them. They should want their own destiny. And it seems, Ukraine actually means borderland. And there's a reason why people call it the Ukraine. We got used to that. It's always been a territory. It's just recently become a country. By the way, I'm all for small countries. I'm all for breakaways, guys. I'm not telling them they can't, but you should have playing it smarter, is being neutral. And they certainly, were tempted. And I'm sure a great many of their politicians are doing the bidding of the Central Intelligence Agency at this point.
Yeah, that's definitely for sure. It's definitely I try to tell people as quickly as I can, because people have the attention span of a goldfish. So it's tough to explain to people, like, this is a very complicated history. It goes back a long way. Ukraine, for example, was a part of Russia for hundreds and hundreds of years, if not culturally, at least, if not officially, at least culturally. And even within Ukraine, there is a split right down the middle, as is with most countries, whether that be societal, like rural and metropolitan, or in this case, it's Orthodox and Unitin. I always forget regular Christian
Unitarian.
and Orthodox. Yeah, Unitarian, regular Christian and Orthodox Christian, and one side that favors, of course, like the one that is bordering Europe, favors more of the European Western type of sphere of influence, and the Western Russia. And even with Crimea was it was always a part of Russia, and it was only given to Ukraine as sort of as a just a placating kind of a gift in the 50s. And it's a difficult thing to kind of unravel for people in a short amount of time, because their awareness of that country starts 3 weeks ago, a month ago. And I mean, they haven't like read Clash of Civilizations, of which is its own type of like meta propaganda. And it's, books like that are meant for officials in the State Department, foreign affairs officials, ambassadors, and things like that, for guiding foreign policy in a very specific kind of way. But it at least gives a good backdrop as to where each country in each of these chapters sits within the history of the world. And to see things playing out like this with the blatant, like fake, super fake propaganda. People in a certain way, I mean, this is how wars always are, but it's a different beast because it's the internet age, and it's an age where everybody, people like us are watching, and they're paying attention. It's like someone like I think it's Ryan Christian from The New American Vagabond. Beautiful work. You know what I'm saying? Like, he is all over it. So there's people watching, so they have to play a different type of a propaganda game. But wars are always like this. You got your babies in the incubators. You've got the World War I. The babies on the bayonets. You've got you take your pick of a war. You got your Gulf of Tonkin. Remember the Maine. You can always find a justification. Even back in the days of the Roman Empire, what the Romans would do is they would cross the border of a territory, wait to get attacked, move back, and then push it. That's how they get the popular support for it, even though they didn't need it, which was strange. It's whatever. But I think because of what just happened over the last 2 years and the way that propaganda was shoved down people's throats, and I think that those in charge of global events noticed just how gullible everyone was, that they thought this was going to be just as easy. They didn't even have to get some ambassador's daughter to make up a story and then put it all over the news. They just took clips from video games and said that was the real thing, and so what are some of the super fake news that you've seen come out of Ukraine so far that has like kind of struck you as the most egregious?
I think just over the overall theme of Zelensky is Churchill and is his finest hour and all. I think that is overblown by leaps and bounds. That's one of the main things. But the term used to say you're going to make the news, it means you're going to be on it. Now it just means they're going to make it. They make the news. And now that they got the control of Silicon Valley and social media platforms, they can just disseminate that information and get people to emotionally attach themselves to the I think that, there's just some great journalists out there, citizen journalists, who are exposing like the things are video games, or this was footage from 8 years ago, and all that's such great work. And if I had time, I would definitely try my hand at doing so. I have to use their work to kind of put into my show because I'm busy running my own business. So I don't really have like a favorite of that, but I told you about the propaganda of the troop count. Like that doesn't seem possible to me. Like, how is that even workable? I mean, our occupation of the Philippines back at the turn of the 20th century, that cost 3,000 American troops, but that was over, a couple of years, and that was heavy fighting. So don't, start throwing out numbers like there's just so many Russian troops. I just thought that was bizarre. And they're doing that in a way, it's a form of mind control and a form of mind warfare to say, look, we're going to support Ukraine, and this is an identity thing. And this is a larger, brutal nation like Russia, and they're backwards and they don't like LGBTQs, and, they don't fly the rainbow flag and all this stuff. And they're not, they're just not friendly to Western, whatever Western culture is now. And then that's why I call it Woke War One, because they're really just, I don't know, assembling a new army. It's of wokesters, and that won't last very long in an actual real battle. But it's like they called them, Michael Flynn called the QAnon people keyboard warriors. It's going to get you the keyboard warriors. Well, the left has those too, and they're they have, I think Ryan Long put out a video today, and I watched, Ann Coulter had retweeted it, and it's just so great. He's wearing a Ukraine shirt. That's his new identity. He's like, you're still doing COVID? No, we're over here now, and like the NPCs have been changed. Let's talk about that meme where they have the NPC with they're taking out the COVID chip and putting in the Ukraine chip. I just think that's just, I'm for the current thing, which is so true. So, I mean, to answer your question, it's all of it. I just think no context and the nightly news, or I call them the hairdos, the teleprompter readers, the Mockingbird people. They have they're not going to give context to this, and they're all for war, because what do they lose? Rain or shine, they're going to get the same amount of money. They're going to get the same amount of accolades. It's just us, the servant class. The drawers of water, you are wood and drawers of water. That's us. We have to go fight the wars and pay the taxes and bail these idiots out. And I don't know. I have anxiety about it, but I don't think it's the end of time. I mean, but the thing is, when you start messing around with war, these little variables crop up. The devil's in the detail. You start messing with that, like that no-fly zone. Like if they tell me tomorrow there's a no-fly zone, I'm going to start like buying storable food and getting massive amounts of iodine, because that's bad. If there's no fly zone, yeah, I'm still worried because it could lead to something, but less anxiety. I mean, the media sure isn't helping, and any kind of news from this, if it's from the mainstream, is intellectually and morally bankrupt.
And I also remember what no boots on the ground and a no-fly zone means, because that meant the end of Libya. And it's a great point that you made just now and earlier, that people really, they can't wrap their minds around what a no-fly zone is. That's a big fucking deal.
Yes.
And to treat it like it's just you can't fly over here today. It's not. That's not how that goes. That's an act of war in and of itself.
Yes.
And I don't know. I have my suspicions that a lot of people that are active online right now are just bots. They're just it is what it is. But to see actual popular support for a new war, I had heard, I always forget the fella's name, but he was on the Joe Rogan podcast a few weeks ago, maybe like a month ago. And he said that where America is in its imperial historical trajectory is something very much like where some European countries were at the time of the Protestant Reformation, where you're coming out of the 30 Years' War and you're instituting this clampdown. It's a religious clampdown, but it's also a cultural and societal clampdown because of the Gutenberg press. And you're trying to stop this dissemination of information. And like it's a good parallel to make. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes, kind of, trope. But I actually think there's some credence to that analysis, because it's really like it's a ruling class that's really trying. So they released the internet on the world, and people started using it for what ambitious, awake people want to use it for. People see the opportunity and the information and business opportunities and all that kind of stuff. But with it, which was probably the original intent of it anyway, but you have to lure people into using it with all of its positive opportunities, is the clampdown, which is the stage that it's coming. It's the beginning of the clampdown. I mean, it's already been it started with Alex Jones, of all fucking people, which was a low-hanging fruit, at least in the eyes of a lot of people. Let them deplatform him, that crazy nut who's been more correct than anybody over the last 10 years than a lot of people on the mainstream. But now they're in this phase where it's the Protestant Reformation clampdown, and it's time for the surveillance state and the censorship and the totalitarian agendas to all converge on each other, because you have all these institutions that have been working together, which is always dangerous. It's dangerous enough when one institution grabs control of a society, but when you have myriad institutions all working together, it's I see it in my mind, and I try to find the right words for it, but I kind of see these like giant monolithic structures all like bridging each other over a sea of people with VR headsets on, and they're all propping each other up. It's the corrupt medical institutions and the corrupt media propping everything up. You got your military-industrial complex. You've got all these different interests that are holding each other's hand through this, door of authoritarianism. And it's a little more poetic than I usually get, but it's just like it's kind of a scary time. I mean, I'm not like personally scared, because however this thing turns out, it turns out, right? Like I've done DMT. I know there's another place, so that's fine. It's fine with me. However this shit shakes out. Where do you see this going? Do you actually see America being dragged into this? I mean, I know they want it, and they have to garner the popular support, but do you actually see it playing out?
It's a real possibility. And you were talking about past empires. I've really come to the conclusion that America is the only nation in history that declined artificially. And that's the dangerous part to me. I mean, yeah, every nation declines, every civilization declines. But, you look at the British Empire. That was the old saying, is the sun never sets on the British Empire, because they had a flag, on every continent, and just around the world, there was always a flag flying. And, they were broken by war, World War I, World War II. And after World War II, they were basically an aircraft carrier for the United States. That's something Gore Vidal said. And I just look at us and I think, gosh, we had the promise of a long healthy republic. This is before we got the central bank in 1913, before we got the Federal Reserve. We had a gold standard, we had a silver standard. It was hard. It was still corruption, but it was hard um, to hide it. And now it's not. I mean, they just cover it up with money. I say money, they cover it up with currency. Fiat currency, and this is something I've been studying. I'm in the gold and silver business, so I study this, and it's just fiat currency is I call it fiat is fake. It's the head of the snake. Everything goes back to it. If you don't have accountability in your money, if there is an unlimited supply, if they can use economic alchemy to create the funds, then that creates everything's fake. Fake politicians, fake businesses, fake wars, fake news. It all stems back from the fake money, because you can just cover it up with fake money. Now, you can only do that for so long, because the mathematics doesn't care about, how, smart you are or your political affiliation. Math just is, and it'll eventually get you. But you look at, I mean, gosh, the Council on Foreign Relations being started after World War I, in the 1920, and just slowly siphoning off the sovereignty of the United States, the United Nations, another, 1945. First head of the United Nations was Alger Hiss, by the way. That they had that at the Presidio and outside of San Francisco, and it was Alger Hiss who was later exposed as a communist spy. So the UN, and then of course the Trilateral Commission. But the United States can't really be compared to other, great empires, across the board, because our ruling elite siphoned off our strength and gave it to other entities or took it for themselves. And you go back to the Council on Foreign Relations, and that's really a British roundtable organization, and the same controllers of Great Britain, with the banking houses, the Rothschilds, the internationalists. They just kind of moved like locusts and moved into the upper echelons of the United States and the governing class, and just did us in. Whether it's endless war or, you talk about going off the gold standard. Richard Nixon took us off the gold standard August 15th, 1971. Gold was $35 an ounce. People always ask me, look how, what do you think gold's going to do? Has it gone up? I'm like, it really hasn't gone up. And people are like, well, it's $2,000 an ounce. And I'm like, yeah, your dollar lost purchasing power. It just it's pretty much staying where it is. And, gold is just money, right? We don't have money anymore. We have currency. But you look at that, and every successive year after 1971, there's been an interesting thing happen. At least in the 70s, you had 71 off the gold standard. 72, we opened China, which, the jury's out for me now. But I used to think that was a great move, because we separated China and Russia, and it was big, big power stuff and interesting to read about. I don't know anymore. Anyway, we opened China in 71. 73, the Trilateral Commission is born. And in 1974, Richard Nixon leaves office, but it's the last time we ever ran a trade surplus in this country. And this is a country that's built on manufacturing. The second act out of Congress was the Tariff Act in 1789. It was a tariff to protect our home markets. Alexander Hamilton had read Adam Smith, but he said, that's great. And he took everything but free trade. And he said, we got to protect our markets. And we did. And, all four presidents on Mount Rushmore supported tariffs. All the figures on our paper currency supported tariffs. And so we had this strong manufacturing. We call this the arsenal of democracy. But by the 1960s, 70s, we'd opened up all these markets to free trade, Japan, Germany, to help rebuild. And that was where we started to see the decline. And, it's just downhill from there. We never ran a trade surplus again. And when I ran for Congress, people thought it was over the top that I talked about $1 trillion trade deficit, and we just hit that. I mean, they thought I was nuts, and I was like, no, we're going to hit $1 trillion, and it's going to get worse. And that all that is it is a blow to U.S. Not only sovereignty, but our independence and our ability to create. Because that's how economies really actually run off production. You can go on consumption so long, but you eventually run out of the things to consume, because you're not producing enough to consume them. So it's a vicious cycle there. And I just tell people this has all been a plan, and it's been a very slow plan. That's why you don't notice it. But if you read the history and you go back and you look at some of the key plays, whether it's 1913 or 1973 or 1979. 1979 is the year that the Central Intelligence Agency employed a guy named Tim Osman, and that's when they got the database, the base known as Al Qaeda. Huge year there for what our future was to be, and so there's all these key moments where you start to see, and history can be understood in reverse in a lot of ways. But we're being driven to decline as opposed to making our own mistakes over time. And that's the long way around. That's what I wanted to add to the conversation, because I think people can get lost in trying to make the comparisons, and I just don't know that there is one.
It's definitely something to see. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't think I can think of any example of a society destroying itself artificially. That's a good point. I mean, I'm sure. Yeah, that's actually a great point, and it's a very to see all the money that was printed, all the currency that was printed over the last few years. That is the inevitable conclusion, and for them to have sped up this process as they have over the last 10 years has been incredible to see. I mean, you said like it's been happening slowly over the course of years, but it is exponentially sped up.
Yes,
every single year.
Reach critical mass. Yeah, I think that's the game is up. I think a lot of people know it. Now they're just going to print their way into the next level and just try to buy themselves time and pick some winners and losers. I was talking today. I was hosting the David Knight Show, and I said the Fed is talking about raising interest rates, which they really can't because it'll crash the economy. But if they do, they've picked the winners and they've picked the losers. And spoiler alert, you're the loser, and the Fed wants you to lose. And, they already want you to lose by just printing, under Trump in the last year, it was 40% of all the dollars ever created. Mm-hmm. And people can't wrap their heads around that. I'm like, if you look at the debt, and by the way, I didn't even answer your last question. We got to start talking about civilizations, and I didn't answer. I will get to that about where I think it's going. But, if you look at the debt of the U.S., in 2000, it was $5 trillion. And in 2010, it was 10 trillion. And in 2020, it was 25 trillion. I mean, it's like, and now it's 30 trillion. So we just keep, and that took us from 1776, if you want to start there, to the year 2000 to get to 5 trillion. And look at where we've gone. So something is accelerating. We see it happening. And it would just, instead of, I feel bad, this is such a pessimistic thing, but you just kind of prepare yourself for collapse, and it's baked into what they've done. And the more that we can understand, that doesn't mean like America goes, like we're America, like we're Americans, and like we identify as that. But our governing class does not. Our governing class cares nothing about this country. They don't get goosebumps. The national anthem. They don't care. It's all theater. They care about, they're sociopaths, care about themselves, or they have international interest or whatever. They're not a lot of people running this country that love it. I think Tucker Carlson said, "How does a country survive when the people that run it hate it?" But I just think these are key indicators. This is not alarmism. The dollar is on its way out as the world's reserve currency. Is on its way out. It's our currency for all intents and purposes, because it's going to be, I think they want to replace it with the digital dollar. It's the problem reaction solution. They create the problem. They, get everybody to react. And by the way, we have the solution, and they have it always, ready to go. So, I just, everything across the board is signaling that it's time to just hunker down and get prepared. It doesn't mean that you stop your daily life. It just, having storable food and water filtration. And, if this may be a great time for you to start your own business, may be a good time to do a career change. It may be a good time to meditate. Take control of something where you feel empowered, because there's going to be a lot of things outside of our control. And believe me, this talk that I'm giving is for me too, because I have to, there's going to be hardships ahead. I don't see any way out of it. As far as war, to answer your question, this is 30 minutes later, but to answer your question, I don't think if things stay the way they are, it just looks like they want to project. Okay, so there's a few possibilities here. It looks like they want to project onto Putin. They want to isolate Putin. We opened China in 72 and we closed Russia in 2022. We just closed it. We closed the books. We don't want an alliance. We don't want to, keep that balance on China. We just want China and Russia to be together and we want to be left alone. I guess that's what our leaders are saying. It's funny. McDonald's pulls out of Russia when they're not communists, but they go in when they're communist. Okay, so I get it now. Pepsi and Coke and all these places go in while you're still the evil empire, what Reagan called the evil empire. But as soon as when you're not communist, they all pull out. So I guess I understand these multinational businesses a little bit better now. But if they stay in that deal where you just want to blame Putin for high gas prices and isolate Russia, then we're probably okay for a while. If you see on the news there's a no-fly zone, I don't want to be alarmist, but that's bad news. And it may be because they don't know the consequences. It may be. But really, we have some dumb people. I was looking at you read the book, The Guns of August by Barbara Tuchman, written back in the 60s, and President Kennedy read that book during the Cuban Missile Crisis, supposedly. And it just talks about all the statesmen, but all the people that were, in charge of Europe at the time. It got away from them. The Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated, and one thing, Austria responds to Serbia. And it just kind of goes in this. All these treaties they didn't know how to stop it, and these were classically educated people. They didn't. Even the Kaiser, like having a nervous breakdown. They painted him as, like you said, babies on bayonets. But that guy at the beginning of the war is like, I don't know how to stop it. They didn't know how to stop it, and these were smart people. What we fast forward to today? I don't know. That just terrifies me. These people, totally unqualified, but in the context of our time, that's just where we are. It's idiocracy with nuclear weapons.
It reminds me a lot of the political class of the era of George III. Like, that was universally understood by British historians as the worst ruling political class in British history. And you got a good point. I just watched Kamala Harris. I don't know who's worse, if it's her or Biden. Neither of them can string together a fucking cogent sentence. It is unbearable to watch. And I'll tell you where these guys did fuck up, though, is that at least with the COVID narrative, that was outside of the grasp of people like us being able to convince other people that we know what we're talking about. Like, we can point to the propaganda, we can read studies ourselves, or at least abstracts of studies, and be able to pick some stuff apart, listen to doctors and things like that. But they fucked up, because this particular narrative is in our wheelhouse. This is what I was doing before all this shit. It was politics, history, geopolitics, all that stuff. So at least when I speak on this stuff, and I learned something with the COVID stuff, is that I learned that I was supposed to stay away from trying to make scientific or medical arguments, at least past my higher than my pay grade, and speak mainly on policy and on what would be done, what were the ramifications of this or that policy, or civil rights and things like that. And so they put it right back in our territory, and even though I was speaking with someone the other day, and I was like, well, what's our next step, right? Do we start moving into politics ourselves? Do we try to start making some type of political party, or what's our next steps? Do we just kind of keep trying to go the intellectual route and convince people? Because at a certain point, politics is going to have to get taken up, right? You tried your hand at Senate. Was it Senate, or were you trying to get into the House?
I ran for the House, ran for U.S. Congress.
Yep, and I have a buddy that's running for Senate, and it almost seems like it's not even a game worth playing. It seems like not only is the deck stacked against you, but the House is against you. And they've already got your, it's like they take your credit card at the door, Right. And they're like, just let it ride, dumbass, let it ride. Like, look at what they did to Ron Paul. That guy actually had a chance, which makes me doubt a little bit the Trump actually getting in. Like, I kind of feel like, as far as if you look at the grand arc of it, in order to really destabilize the political landscape of America, you needed Trump. Even though he did some good things. I don't hate the guy as much as I hate all the politicians that he was surrounded with and that came before him and have come since. But all of that is kind of speculative anyway. But yeah, what do you think is do you think it's smart for people that are of our kind of political bend? Do you think it's smart to go into politics, or just something to just steer clear of?
I had a really smart political operative give me some great advice I never took. And that's when I first ran. She said, it's going to be a heartbreak. Don't do this. Start a political action committee, start a PAC. You'll have more influence. You'll be able to raise more money. The candidacy, she's like, you care about the ideas, so just go after those things. And I just ignored her. I wanted to, be like a Huey Long figure and go to the, every time I could get in front of a crowd and do a stump speech, I'd give one. And that's what most politicians and people, like, they hate question time. I loved it. Ask me questions, ask me what I believe in. I can tell you, I don't have to think about it, to read note cards. And that was a lot of fun. I would tell everybody to at least run for office one time. I've had different ideas that, like, what if everybody ran for office at the same time? Can we just blow up the system? I mean, what if, if everybody who's eligible ran for something, then they wouldn't be able to put in their designated, automaton. So it's just like, mathematically, it's just true. If we all started, like, everybody run for everything.com or something, like, sign up to just run, and it would blow it up. And I think that would be fun. Just see, we go back to the 17th Amendment, that we got in 1913, kind of that year we got the income tax and the Federal Reserve. That was so that the states could no longer choose the senators themselves. The legislatures, by the Constitution before the 17th Amendment, would choose the senators, and they made it direct election because democracy, and democracy triumphed there because now the bankers control instead of the legislators control. And so, I mean, as I've learned more about voting and learned more about democracy, I'm not a fan of democracy per se. I even look at our popular vote and I'm like, hey, why don't we just go back to, instead of spending billions of dollars on the presidential election, maybe just go back to where we were between the first and sixth presidents, where we just had Congress vote. But instead of having what we have as Congress, the United States Constitution says that you should have a representative for every 32,000 people. And right now we have a U.S. representative for every 800,000 people. So that would dramatically change the landscape. So I'm for more of a Republican style, not the party. I want people and representatives closer to where their constituents are. I want a series of checks and balances. I don't want, I would go back and scrap the 17th Amendment. Instead of having popular vote for senators, let's go back to our legislators. You know why? You'd pay a lot more attention to your legislator, your state legislator. You'd know who that person was. And that was the point. We talk about national elections, and I've learned lessons over time on this. I'm not going to participate in a national election again unless there's like a Ron Paul third party movement. But that seems like ballot access and all that stuff is just, it seems to me like our job is ideas. It's the realm of ideas. Yeah. Practical stuff, local level. Go run for, if you got a douchebag that's in the city council, maybe 5 of y'all get together. I was thinking about these parents that are upset with their school boards. Well, don't put one person up. 100 of you run, and that way somebody's going to win, and it won't be the person who got all the money from the state lobbyists. So, I mean, I know that's kind of pie in the sky, but these are strategies you can do that really don't cost much. And those of us who are grassroots and real, we're never going to have the same kind of money. So I would say stick with the realm of ideas, stay local. Third parties can be cool. I mean, I don't see one on the horizon that would get any sort of, real support. There's been the Constitution Party, started by Bill Cooper, and that turned into what the Constitution Party is now. I mean, it seems like a nice party. There's a Libertarian Party. They have ballot access, which is really important. It's really hard to get ballot access. But I tell people go run. But politics in and of itself is not the answer to our current woes, because I mean, you look at, and I'll end with this. You look at Texas. I'm from Texas. I live in Branson, Missouri now, in the Ozarks, but my family goes back to pre-Civil War Texas, and so the elections there, I don't see any evidence that any one of the grassroots reaction candidates to the 2020 lockdowns, I don't think any of them won. I don't think any of the I don't think that crop of people primarying the Republic, I think all the establishment people won. That's sad, because you had massive, blowback from what, Governor Abbott did there and all these little petty potentates. And it should have been a massive, for lack of a better term, right wing. The right wing should have been, the true rock rib conservative. None of those people won, to my knowledge. They had Shelley Luther. My mom has a antique mall in Denison, Texas. And Shelley Luther, who was that hairdresser who stayed open and got arrested there in Texas. That was in that, I forget what, Judge Jenkins, I think, down in Dallas County, put her in jail. And she lost twice. Wow. How do you somebody genuine who's just like, and you should see her brochure, and it's just hard. It's right wing, John Birch Society stuff. And I'm like, how did she lose? And the guy she ran against on Ballotpedia didn't even have a picture. So, I mean, they just pick the establishment, and I hate to say they use the voting machines, but any electronic voting is a dead end anyway. The fact that we have electronic voting, you have to scrap all of that in order to have any semblance of a true count. But they just pick they'll triangulate an area. Let's say you're running for U.S. Congress in the Republican Party. They'll find out how many people vote. They'll triangulate how many of those people have voted, more than once. And then you'll just hit those people with mailers, and they'll hit them again and again and again and again. And the people that they see the most, that's who they'll vote for. Well, it costs about $100,000 a round, to do that, 120,000 now. So if you got $1 million, you're going to probably be the victor, unless you're up against another $1 million. Then you got to spend $4 million. You see what I mean? So if the person who has and that's just the way those voters are in where I'm from, and if they get the most mailers, and the message is pretty milquetoast, you're gonna win. So they figured that out, and that's why none of these grassroots real candidates won. I'd love to be pleasantly surprised. So email me if I'm wrong.
All right, Tony. Thank you very much for coming on the show, man. I am genuinely happy to meet you, and I am very surprised we just went an hour without talking about beards, bro.
Oh, well,
how did we go a full hour without mentioning you have an incredible beard?
It's part of who I am now. The beard just goes with me. I don't think I'll ever change it. And it's even if it gets gray, which I'm like, it's just getting grayer. And is it because I'm doing broadcast or not enough broadcast? I don't know.
There's a direct relationship between the number of broadcasts you do and how gray your beard goes.
Like Samson.
I'm following you. How old are you?
I'm 42.
42. Give me another 7 years. I'm right behind you, bro.
Well, that's a great beard you have there too. And I recommend the Wolf and Iron people for their beard oil. I'm looking forward to my next show.
Nice. All right, yeah, Tony, man, thanks a lot for coming on the show. We'll have to have you on again, man.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.